All right, the Columbian Exchange. What is it and how does it relate to biology? A little bit before we get into this, we got to talk about the Old World, which was Europe and Middle East and North Africa and Asia, what they knew of uh, the Asian continent. And then the New World is the North and South Americas. That's when, after Columbus discovered the New World, this is all brand new. New plants, new people, new animals, and then they brought it back to the Old World, all this stuff that they knew from before. So, what is the Columbian Exchange? It's also known as the Grand Exchange. So, if you go looking for it, you can find it under that name as well. And it was exchange of goods, ideas, agriculture, livestock, and disease back and forth across Europe. The Europeans, when they colonized the Americas, they brought with them a whole bunch of stuff. And when they went back to Europe, they brought with them a whole bunch of stuff. People tend to hoard things and bring stuff back and forth here and there. We're not going to focus so much because this is biology. We're not going to focus so much on the goods and ideas. We'll look at the agriculture, the livestock, the diseases, and how does this fit in with biology? Well, we've been talking about evolution over the last couple of weeks, and one of the aspects of evolution is divergent evolution, where organisms have a common ancestor and then they split into different types of organisms, right? The burro, the zebra, a horse, they all have a common ancestor. They all live in different regions. They all serve different purposes and are subject to varying degrees of domestication um, and varying degrees of usefulness. So that happened as well in the New World and the Old World because they were geographically isolated up until Columbus showed up. Then what we got is coevolution. That's when two species evolve together due to their close relationship. On a microscopic level, coevolution, uh, in your gut, you have what's called good bacteria, and the bacteria in your gut is what helps digest the food that you eat. Um, in health class later on, we'll talk about nutrition as well in further lessons. But you need a certain amount of good gut bacteria in order to process certain foods. And if you get the bad bacteria, it'll cause intestinal trouble. For instance, ulcers can be caused by bad bacteria. So if you're not getting enough bacteria, uh, eat some yogurt. Yogurt's got good bacteria. It's got a live culture in it. If not, you can, or if you're lactose intolerant or something like that, you can get some what's called nutritional yeast. Um, kind of tastes a little bit like cheese. It's not too bad though, and that'll help build up that gut bacteria so it can crowd out some of the other bacteria. Um, and then what we got is evolutionary medicine. This is a really fast growing field of medicine these days, and it's where medicine meets biology, basically. And the big one that I learned about when I first learned about evolutionary medicine was a village in South America, and they had some kind of intestinal bug going through some kind of bacteria, um, and the people who had African descent would get a little bit sick, but then the people with more European or Native American descent would get very sick, like deathly sick, close to dying. Some of them even did die. And what it was found was the bacteria that was making everybody sick had co-evolved uh, with people in Africa, so that the people of African descent had lived with it throughout the last few tens thousands of years. So they were able to handle it better than people who had not lived with it. Um, So when you have geographically uh, distinct populations, they tend to diverge as well as co-evolve with different organisms. And that's sort of what happened here, or that is what happened here in the Americas. So agriculture, pre-Columbian distribution, right? We're back to the Columbian Exchange here, where we've got these different. Something interesting: Florida had no oranges, no citrus fruit at all in the Americas until Columbus showed up. So Florida oranges didn't exist before Columbus, right? On this list, whole bunch of stuff on this list. The big ones we're going to look at today are beans, maize, or corn, peanuts. Peanuts are also beans, and squash. None of that was in the European diet, but these all exist in Native American diet. Now, why is that important? Well, from nutrition, we have legumes, right? Beans, peas, stuff like that, as well as peanuts, and a wheat source, in this case, maize, corn. Um, when those are combined, they create a complete protein, right? So you got half of the protein and another half of the proteins that our body needs to build muscle and to function, and combined, they create a full protein. So when you have stuff like a corn tortilla and refried beans, make a bean burrito. That's a complete protein. If you have peanut butter on wheat bread, wheat toast, that's a complete protein, right? So what this means for the natives and not the Europeans is that the native, wait, all right, so the three sisters, before we get onto that, three sisters, this was kind of pretty ubiquitous throughout North, Central, even South America, where they would grow corn, beans, and squash all together. The squash had vitamins and minerals. The corn and beans, they completed that complete protein. All of this stuff had good carbohydrates as well for the nutritionally minded. Not a whole lot of fat. Beans have some fat in it, but not a whole lot of fat in that diet. Um, what that meant, because they were able to get their complete proteins through their diet, was that animal proteins, which is a complete protein as well, was supplemental, right? And because they didn't need to have animals in their diet, because they were getting all the protein that they needed in their diet through their slash and burn agriculture, they didn't have a whole lot of domesticated animals. Now, the Incas in the Andes, they had alpacas, they had guinea pigs. They raised the guinea pigs for meat, as well as ceremonial purposes. And the alpacas they raised for their wool. Remember, we talked about the alpacas and how they had really good wool, and the Incan weavers were the best in the world at the time. However, the Europeans, cattle, fowl, meaning like chickens and ducks and such, and pigs. Um, those three lived in close proximity with humans in Europe, and Europeans had grown up, evolved over 40,000 years of domestication with those animals, and they actually lived with them. The houses in Europe, the peasant houses in Europe, would more closely be related to barns. When it was cold, they'd just bring the animals inside, and the people would sleep in the loft. Uh, they lived in very close proximity. But with those domesticated animals, they bring influenza, the flu, right, and the big one, smallpox. Um, so how this all relates, right? Because the Europeans have been living with these domestic animals, they had grown immunities uh, to influenza and smallpox as well. Now, when Columbus showed up on his second voyage, he brought colonists with him, 1,000 colonists with him. With that, they had all the animals, the domesticated animals. Um, the big ones were the pigs. In this case, on his second voyage, the pigs had been kept down below in the hold, And then when the colonists arrived, the pigs got released, and with that came the flu, influenza. And that swine flu was not something that the Native Americans had any kind of immunity built up towards. They had never had pigs, they never lived with pigs, so they never got the pig diseases. And that killed off a very large portion of the natives, so much so that it was like 10, 20 years. The estimated population of Hispaniola, the Taino Indians, went from somewhere estimated upwards of 1 million down to about 9,000, which was a huge drop off, and mostly due to the diseases that the Europeans brought because the Native Americans, they didn't have any immunity to those diseases because they never domesticated those animals, because they didn't need those animals, because they could get all of their protein through their agriculture, which is something that the Europeans didn't really have access to. So that's about it. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Thank you.